Our wonderful evening continues. Jonah Goldberg is a best-selling author and widely syndicated columnist. He is one of the most prominent political commentators in America today. A Fox News contributor and regular Fox News all-star on Special Report with Bret Baier, he is known for blending humor and insight on the pressing issues of the day. And I will tell you, we had him on the air about a week ago, and he was funny as all get out. So you got to love that. Goldberg is a contributing editor to the National Review, was the founding editor of the National Review Online. He's also a weekly columnist for the Los Angeles Times, and his syndicated column appears regularly in newspapers across the nation. A fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, Jonah Goldberg was named by The Atlantic as one of the top 50 commentators in America. His first book, Liberal Fascism, The Secret History of the American Left from Mussolini to the Politics of Meaning, Random House Doubleday published it, was a #1 New York Times and Amazon bestseller both. His most recent book, The Tyranny of Clichés, How the Liberals Cheat in the War of Ideas, was an instant bestseller as well. And Goldberg is currently a member of the Board of Contributors for the USA Today. Please give a big PLC 25th anniversary welcome to Jonah Goldberg.
Well, let's see. I'm going to put on my timer because I'm usually bad at these things. Thank you all so much for having me. For years when I go to groups like this, I would say I'm happier than Helen Thomas at a Hamas rally to be here, but she recently went on to get her 72 virgins or something, and so we can't do that anymore. I was thinking about, I've been trying some other ones, like happier than Elizabeth Warren in a sweat lodge, but as a fake Indian myself, I find that offensive. Happier than Joe Biden on Lime Jello Day at the home? I mean, I don't know. I'm still working on it. Let me say up front, I sat next to the governor, and I could see he's already squirming. The second he heard the Helen Thomas joke, he was like, oh, God, this is being videotaped, and I'm running for office. So let me say a couple of, first of all, he is pre-disavowed anything I say that might get him in trouble. And also, I should say that I normally have a very standoffish attitude towards politicians. As a pundit and a fairly snarky one, my view towards them is sort of the same that research scientists have towards lab animals. You just don't want to get too attached, Well, I thank RJ for the great intro. One point of personal privilege, and anyone who's heard me speak publicly knows that I truly bring this up virtually every time I give a public speech, because I'm so proud of it. One thing that was left out of my bio is that when the Los Angeles Times picked me up as a columnist, Barbra Streisand publicly canceled her subscription in protest. And in my line of work, I should have just quit, because you're supposed to leave on a high note, and it just doesn't get a lot better than that. So here's the problem. RJ said I'm this funny guy, and I'm supposed to be this serious guy too, and that's a real tough order to fill, especially on the right these days, because conservatives can be kind of dour. I don't know if you've noticed. And it kind of makes me feel like the guy who wants to become both a veterinarian and a taxidermist, because that way he can promise you'll get your dog back no matter what. I asked my wife, who's a professional speechwriter and an all-around wonderful woman, what I should talk about tonight, because it was kind of open-ended. I mean, the program just says something like the landscape of politics or something like that. And she said, oh, look, that's easy. Just, take a page from Barack Obama and just talk about yourself. But you guys probably don't want me to do that. So I thought one place to start is, there's an old joke. Forgive me if you've heard it before. It's about you thought I was done with the jokes, right? There's an old joke about an anatomy professor at medical school. And he's in one of those giant medical auditoriums where, the seats all the way up. And he's going to give a lecture. And he walks into class and he says, first question. What organ of the human body expands to 8 times its original size when properly stimulated? Mrs. Jones, and he points to a young lady in the back of the room, and the young lady gets all flustered and starts to blush, and she gets nervous. And she's like, oh, Professor, I couldn't possibly say, Professor, no, don't pick me. And the professor goes, oh, okay, Mr. Smith, and he points to Mr. Smith. And the guy in the front row says, the pupil of the human eye when it goes from light to dark. And the professor says, correct. Now, Ms. Smith, I have 3 things to say to you. First of all, you didn't do your reading. Second of all, you have a filthy mind. And third of all, you are destined to live a life of unfulfilled expectations. The great thing about that joke is it kind of works for both sides these days in politics. In 2008, when Barack Obama came in, riding a Pegasus, promising to convert unicorn poop into renewable energy, we were all told this was going to be this great new deal, new progressive era, that things were only going to get better, and that, when I used to talk to free market conservative groups around the country back in 2008, I might as well have been talking to Civil War reenactors, or attendees of a Klingon wedding. I mean, we just felt like we were just completely locked out of what was going on in Washington, and that, history wasn't on our side. And I'll get back to that in a little bit, but on the flip side, it also is a little bit true for conservatives these days. And I figured I'd talk a little bit about what's going on with Obamacare. I'm sorry, I keep reaching down to drink water. I smoked an enormous amount of pot before I got here, and I get this dry mouth. And I hope I'm going to put it up on the podium. I know it ruins the video, but since the owners of the network are around here somewhere, they'll just have to forgive me. A lot of us thought when the Obamacare website debuted, in a fashion that you'd have to have a heart of stone not to laugh at, that this spelt the end of it right from the beginning. And it was, and I think in some ways a lot of us, me included, got our hopes up a little too high with that. And it's important to keep in mind, none of the serious critics of Obamacare who have pointed to the deep and abiding structural flaws expected them to screw up the website. Right? I mean, this was a complete gimme. We just assumed they're going to get the website going. And we had no idea that they were going to farm out the construction of that thing to the finest computer programmers the Amish community has to offer. And I realize I'm in Pennsylvania, and I apologize for that. And I'll tell you, absolutely true story. I was on the Special Report Online show, which they do most Wednesdays after the normal Special Report show. Brett then does this online thing. And it gets a little wackier because it's just for the internet, and it's a little more fun and a little more relaxed. And I said basically that joke, and Charles Krauthammer decided to have some fun with me, and he gets all dudgeony and says, I, for one, want to separate myself from Jonah's heartless and insensitive attack on the Amish community. And I just rolled my eyes and said, Charles, why are you even bothering? It's not like they're watching. I think the only reason they have me on the show is because I make Charles laugh every now and then, and it's the only thing that makes my mom proud when I'm on that show is afterwards she says, you made Charles laugh, because I'm chopped liver and she loves him more. It's just terrible. Anyway, but the simple fact is that all of the problems with the Obamacare website, with Obamacare, are still there. In fact, most of them have been proven to be exactly what conservative critics said they were going to be. We still know that Obama lied when he said that you can keep your doctor. We still know that Obama lied when he said you can keep your insurance. We still know Obama was wrong when he said it was going to be cheaper. We know that he was wrong when he said it was going to bend the cost curve down. And we know that he's wrong when he says today that 7 million people have gotten insurance through the Obamacare exchanges. Well, technically that's true, but that's because at least 4 to 5, maybe even 5.5 million of them lost their insurance because of Obamacare. At least with cash for clunkers, the government didn't actually come to your house and take a sledgehammer to your car. Right? Then say, okay, trade it in, you get a better car. But this is what they've done, is they've gone and they've blown up or a lot of people's insurance policies and then cheered and celebrated because they got to sell them more expensive insurance policies. And the beauty of it was that they said, if you don't appreciate it, it's because you're an idiot. And they even called those insurance plans, which people liked, including my colleague on Special Report, Kirsten Powers, who's not an idiot and not a conservative and was really ticked off. It reminded me, when she was describing her new insurance plan to me one night, it reminded me of a story a friend of mine from college told, or a friend of mine who, when he was in college, he owned a painting company in San Francisco, and their motto on the side of their van was, "We may be slow, but we're expensive." So, yes, it's absolutely true that hitting this 7 million mark, whatever the flaws in that number, and I think we're going to find out that there are a lot of flaws in that number. How many of them were previously insured? How many of them are paying more? How many of them aren't paying now, which means they're not technically enrolled? There are a lot of things that we're going to find out about that number, but it was a good moment for the White House to hit that number. But it's telling, the White House asked the major networks for primetime coverage so he could do a national announcement where he could sort of spike the ball in the end zone and say, we hit 7 million. And all the networks said no, which is a real sign of But he's still getting great coverage because a lot of the press is taking, without any skepticism, this idea that 3 million 26 and unders have gotten onto health insurance because of this provision that says that you can stay on your parents' plan, what they call the slacker subsidy. What they don't want to mention, as my friend Ovik Roy from Forbes pointed out the other day, is that according to all the census surveys, the share of people under the age of 26 who've gotten insurance hasn't budged. And that there is, in fact, no evidence that that 3 million number is correct, at least according to the Washington Post fact checker, who's not exactly, an employee of National Review. But regardless, the simple fact is that that 7 million number, which is a good talking point and a good moment for the White House, doesn't change the experience that millions of people are living in their own lives. There were a lot of people who were sort of on the right who were sort of moping like a big dog whose food bowl had been moved when they saw, Obama celebrating and they saw the good press coverage and they said, oh my gosh, this is all over. It really changes remarkably little. If you had your health insurance canceled and then you had to go buy health insurance as a 50-year-old man that had to cover OBGYN coverage, right? And that the deductibles were higher and the premiums were higher than what you had before. The idea that they got 7 million people to enroll is not going to say, oh, wow, now I'm really in favor of Obamacare. You're still going to be really ticked off. And if you're a company and the company says we're going to scale back your benefits or we're going to roll back your coverage or we're going to throw you into the exchanges, the fact that you're one of those 7 million isn't going to make you fall in love with Obamacare either. And so the actual lived experience of people is very different. And in fact, one of the perverse things about Obamacare that's happened so far is that because it has been talked about so endlessly and because Obama has taken such complete ownership of it, any bad thing that happens to you when it comes to health insurance, people ascribe now to Obamacare, whether it needs to be or not. That's not a great place to be in for a party. And besides, this is another really important point. If media coverage made Obamacare popular, it would have been popular by now. right? I mean, Obamacare has never once been popular in this country. Not once. And the idea that somehow because they hit this utterly arbitrary and not all that reliable number that all of a sudden people are going to flock to it is sort of ridiculous. Which sort of brings me into a little bit of the rank punditry about talking about the midterm elections. I'm not going to talk about Pennsylvania's elections because one of my first rules is never talk to an audience that knows more about something than you do. But when you look at where the midterm elections, primarily the Senate races are shaping up, this doesn't seem to have changed anything at all. I mean, they had this great poll that came out of North Carolina where Kay Hagan was losing. I mean, literally they could put a folding chair into the questionnaire and Kay Hagan would lose by 12 points. She's losing to the entire Republican field of primary opponents. Names that that probably 80% of the North Carolina electorate don't know. They just know that they don't want her again. And you take Mark Pryor, which is an even better example. Just this week, Mark Pryor, because of this boomlet in Obamacare, had to say on the record, on camera, that, yeah, he would vote for it again. It's not a great place to be in Arkansas, saying that you would vote for it again. Debbie Wasserman Schultz the other day was on MSNBC, the head of the DNC and America's smartest lady. And Chuck Todd asked her, can you name a single fix to Obamacare that you would support? And like a deer caught in the headlights, she could not name a single one. She was like, sure, in theory, we'd be in favor of all that. She's now locked in to say it's just as good as it's ever been. Barack Obama is now calling it Obamacare again. And so in effect, the Democratic Party has doubled down on Obamacare. And as you look forward to these elections, the electorate that votes in midterm elections are more likely to be people who dislike Obamacare. Self-employed people, independent people, older, whiter, more suburban. Those are the people who tend to vote in midterm elections. And it is not looking great. Right now you have a field of, I think it's up to 12 or 13 Senate races where the Republicans are either likely to win or at least competitive. And the wider that race opens up, the more avenues the GOP has to taking back to the Senate. So that's why we're now seeing Obama revert to where he is most comfortable. We saw earlier this week he was out on the campus of the University of Michigan. He loves to talk to adoring crowds of people who already think he's awesome, and then he tells himself that he's persuaded them about something. And so now we're going to get all this stuff about the war on women and the war on binders full of women and how basically if you sneeze it's racist and everything is but all of that is geared towards ginning up his base. They've basically given up on getting out independents and forget Republicans, right? It is basically about getting young people, minorities, single women, the Julias and whatnot, to rush to the polls. The problem is that those demographics rarely show up for midterm elections as it is, and they didn't show up in 2010 for Obama either when he campaigned for them. Which raises one of these sort of we keep hearing about how Obama is the greatest orator since Cicero. And first of all, I've never heard a tape of Cicero. People just tell me he was a great orator. But the irony about Barack Obama is he is a great campaigner and salesman for himself. There's not a single example of Barack Obama moving public attitudes or perceptions or opinions on a major public policy issue simply by trying to persuade the American people. In his first year in office, he gave 56 speeches on Obamacare. That's more than one a week. He had a couple primetime national addresses. Couldn't get it to have a majority of Americans support Obamacare. If he couldn't do it then, the idea that he can do it now when people's actual lived lives are going to be worse from it strikes me as unlikely. In 2012, he went on college campuses. He visited college campuses more often than a Red Bull delivery truck. But that was when he was selling himself. And when he was selling himself, it's all, it's sort of like a Pepsi commercial. You're great people if you vote for me. The best thing about you is how much you love me, was his sort of approach to things. You can't do that in midterm elections all that well, or at least I wouldn't want to bet on it. And so I think that, I'm not in the business of, guessing these kinds of things. Actually, it's exactly the business I am in. Sorry, I take that back. The word pundit in Indian means a master of science, philosophy, literature, history, ethics, psychology. In America, a pundit is simply a journalist who's willing to make any prediction imaginable so long as he's not held accountable. And he's perfectly willing to change the prediction if there's free shrimp and an open bar involved. So I don't think that the Republicans can just lie back and just run on hating Obamacare. I think that's a bad idea. I think they have to talk about replacing it, not just repealing it. I think the 7 million thing is... The 7 million number proves that the death spiral is not going to kick in soon enough, right? I mean, what I was always saying during the website stuff was that Obamacare was always designed to fail, just not this quickly. And one of the hidden advantages of what Obamacare has done is by destroying the pre-existing healthcare system, in effect, it makes it no longer necessary for Republicans to defend it. It was one thing when we were so opposed to socialized medicine that we basically said the status quo is great. Well, the status quo wasn't great. There were some good things about it, and there were some bad things about it. But now that Obama has completely taken ownership of it and transformed it and tried to turn the insurance companies into utilities, it gives Republicans a lot more room to come up with alternatives and better alternatives for health care. And not just the stuff about cross state lines and all that, but some serious innovative thinking. But it's got to do more than that. I mean, the Republican Party needs to have an alternative agenda. And I think that we're starting to see that. Bobby Jindal came out with some good stuff very recently. I'm not sure I endorse all of it, but it's a good start. And we're going to need to see a lot more of that. On the prediction thing, I think if Republicans aren't stupid, which is always an if, the Republicans will take back the Senate. And then basically Barack Obama is a ceremonial president with some foreign policy responsibilities that he's going to shirk anyway. But I want to talk in my last few minutes here about conservatives, and not about Republicans, and not about Obama, and not about any of that, but about conservatives. Because I'll be honest with you, I take no burning pride in calling myself a Republican. I am a Republican. I like the Republican Party. But I'm a conservative first. I take great pride in calling myself a conservative. And I very much liked hearing in the video about how the Tea Party's helped galvanize and grow this organization, in part because I've always said about the Tea Parties that they were sort of like a stem cell therapy for the Republican Party. Not embryonic, but stem cell therapy for the Republican Party, in that they helped it regrow a spine. And but so here's the thing, and this is as much of an indictment of me and the institutions that I hold dear as anybody. The single most persuasive advocate for conservatism and conservative policies in the last 5.5 years has been Barack Obama. If not for his failures and his inability to live up to his light worker Jedi Knight promises, we would have been in real trouble. I mean, the governor, who I think is exactly right when he's talking about the stimulus and the failure of the stimulus, look, Milton Friedman, if you had asked Milton Friedman if you dropped $800 billion on the economy in some Keynesian money vomiting operation, he would have said, of course you're going to get a sugar high. Of course you're going to get some growth in the short term, but then you're going to pay for it in terms of inflation, and you're just basically borrowing from the future, so you have to pay that money back. But they couldn't even spend $800 billion in a smart way, right? They couldn't do the stimulus. And that's, the thing they always trot out, which is one of my most infuriating talking points, is they always trot that they saved or created, 5 million jobs or whatever it is, right? So the problem with the saved or created thing is it's utterly unfalsifiable. I swear to you, every morning I do or save 500 push-ups. And I always like to ask when I do a lot of talks on liberal college campuses, and one of the things I always like when they talk about the stimulus and all this, I always like to ask them, you think Obama's awesome, you think George W. Bush is, just has hooves, right? And you think that the stimulus works, and you think that Obama is this brilliant technocrat who knows how to run the economy. If that's the case, why did he put half of all the jobs he created since he's been in office, in George Bush's Texas? Right? Why didn't he put them in Chicago? Or, So Edmund Burke, who was the founder of modern conservatism, he once said that example is the school of mankind, and he will learn it no other. And what he meant by this is sometimes you have to show people things. You can't just tell them. You have to make people actually live through the experience to understand something. I always thought that Ed Koch, who was the former mayor of New York City when I was growing up, had it better. When he was voted out of office, when he ran for a third term, he was asked, are you ever going to run again? And Koch said, no. The people of New York fired me, and now they must be punished. And we're seeing something very much like that with Bill de Blasio in New York right now, right? They're getting exactly what they asked for, good and hard. And we saw that with Barack Obama. If they hadn't mangled Obamacare, if they hadn't mangled the stimulus, if they had bought off some Republicans in the beginning, which a lot of people in Washington were concerned with, if they had gone to the Republicans and said, we'll give you not half a loaf, but 30-40% of the stimulus to do what you want with it, they would have bought, because Obama's popularity was huge back then. You could have seen a third of the Republican Party buy into the stimulus, therefore buying into Obamonomics, therefore buying into the economy, therefore having no argument in the 2010 midterm elections. But the Republicans, in large part because of the influence of the Tea Parties, stood firm, and they didn't buy into that, or the forces that led to the Tea Parties, I should at least say. And so people have got, college kids, everybody has got to watch what happens when you give liberalism unfettered power, which is what they had in their first 2 years, and it hasn't worked out that well. And conservatives should be very grateful for that, because we have not been doing a great job at persuasion. Now, persuasion is something, I talk to a lot of conservative activist groups, and persuasion is hard, but it's what politics is about. It is about bringing more people over to your side than currently are there. It is about convincing people that your policies are the right way to go. And so many people on the right these days, I know a lot of 20-something very smart young conservative pundits in waiting and columnists and TV personalities. And one of the problems I find with them is that they can have a really good career only talking to audiences that already agree with them. And look, I like Ted Cruz a lot, but and I know him personally, and I admire the guy, and he's very smart. But during the debates about the shutdown, I heard him talking about how everywhere I go to give his speeches, I talk to audiences that just want to get rid of Obamacare. It's like, yeah. What other audiences is Ted Cruz going to be going to talk to? The Abilene Tea Party group, that's what they want to hear, and that's what he said. It reminds me of how when Richard Nixon was once asked if he believed in the population explosion. He said, yeah, of course the world's overpopulated. Everywhere I go, I see huge crowds. And so the point I'm getting at is that Republicans and conservatives and libertarians need to get better at explaining to people who disagree with us why they should agree with us, and not spend all of their time talking amongst ourselves about how right we are. In the 2012 election, which the Arabs have a word for, which they usually use to describe the founding of Israel, but I'll borrow it. It's called the Nakba, which means the catastrophe. We spent a lot of time talking about why Mitt Romney lost. And I think there are a lot of good reasons why Mitt Romney lost. I like Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney's an honorable guy, would have made a better president. His skill set was perfectly suited for so many of the problems that we face as this country. But he lost for a couple different reasons. He lost because he ran that campaign as if it was his race to lose rather than his race to win. He ran a very cautious race as if he was 4 points ahead rather than as if he was 3 points behind. They had a real hostility towards ideas. They wrote off persuading almost half the electorate, the 47%, as unwinnable. And they also, Mitt Romney had what I've been calling for years an authentic inauthenticity problem. And what I mean by that is that it's sort of like, how do I explain this? It's sort of like the first time you saw an alligator, you think it's fake, right? Like a friend would say, hey, look, it's an alligator. And you're like, dude, no way, that's not real. And then you get up close to it and you see it move. And you go, whoa! It just turns out that alligators look fake, right? Mitt Romney looks like the picture that comes with the frame, right? He was the kind of politician that just had a very hard time connecting with people. And I've met him in person, and he's a wonderful person. I'm not trying to, but it's just a simple fact. The most telling poll that came out of that election was where they asked people what they thought about Obama and Romney won on better commander-in-chief, better for the economy, better for dealing with the budget or whatever. One of those running away by double digits. On the question of cares about people like you, he lost by something like 60 points. That is a huge problem for conservatives and Republicans. I personally love doling out red meat like it's an abattoir. But at the end of the day, we got to win more people over to our side. It means we got to think about things a little differently. And one of the things we got to think about is not just why Mitt Romney lost, but why Barack Obama won. And I'll give you an example of what I'm getting at. For reasons I think having to do with original sin, I went to the 2012 Democratic Convention. And the opening video at the convention has this line in it which says, "Government is the one thing we all belong to." I mean, as a sort of Tea Party-ish guy, that makes me want to flip the safety on my rifle, right? Because it completely inverts the whole idea of the American founding, which is the idea that we are citizens, not subjects, that the government belongs to us, we don't belong to the government, right? But the shocking thing here is that video is not aimed at me, and it ain't aimed at anybody in this room. It's aimed to a whole bunch of people who don't hear it the way I hear it. They hear it as, here is something that you can belong to, that you can be part of, that you can join, that will give you meaning, that will give you respect. And there are people who are craving that out there. I don't know if you remember The Life of Julia, right? Which was easily the single creepiest piece of political campaigning material in the last 50 years. For those of you who don't remember, it's a PowerPoint presentation about the fictional life of Julia, and every single frame begins with the words, "under President Obama." Under President Obama, Julia gets head start, Julia gets this, Julia gets that. Probably the creepiest sentence that has ever appeared in American life, at least my lifetime, was the frame that said, "Under President Obama, Julia decides to have a child." I mean, that just makes me feel unsafe. Nowhere in Julia's life do we ever see a husband or a father or a family. She has the kid. He turns 18. He's gone, never comes back. And at the end of her life, she gets to work in a garden, a community garden. She doesn't get her own garden. She has to work in somebody else's garden. A few years ago, or about last year, a year and a half ago, there was a great op-ed in the Washington Post about why African-American participation in Major League Baseball is the lowest it's been in over a generation. And the author looked at a lot of different reasons, and this was only one of them, but one of the explanations from a black Little League coach in Washington, D.C. was that baseball is a game that is taught by fathers. And, you know, basketball is something you learn down on the playground with your friends. Football is something you learn from your peers, out, at the park. But baseball, you learn baseball by sitting down with your dad as he explains the Byzantine, bizarre number world of baseball. You learn baseball by playing catch with your dad on the front lawn. And if you don't have a dad around, much harder to get into baseball versus other sports. Well, that's true about a lot of things. And it's not just true about African Americans, it's true about white Americans. The out-of-wedlock birth rate for whites now is higher than it was for blacks when Patrick Moynihan sounded the alarm about blacks in 1965. And it's far higher for Hispanics. It's a mess. There's an enormous breakdown of the family out there. And so here's the reason why I bring all these things up, why I bring up Julie and the DNC video and all of this, is that one of my favorite intellectuals, a guy named Robert Nisbet, wrote a book called Quest for Community. And the argument that he made was that we are all hardwired. We are born, whether it's given the spark by God or evolution or whatever, we all have an innate desire to want to belong to a group, to be part of a family, of a community. It is in us as deep as any hunger or thirst is. And so the problem is that so much of society now, the opportunities to feel like you're part of a community are being denied to vast swaths of our fellow citizens. You can be the greatest single mom in the world, and there's some great single moms out there. It is very difficult to do all of the things for your kid that two parents can do if you're one parent. My colleague at the American Enterprise Institute, Charles Murray, likes to say, there are very few single men who coach soccer. And the reason for this is a well-founded fact of the social science literature. Men tend to do what our wives tell us to do. And it's not just family breakdown. It's the changing nature of manufacturing and the labor market and the loss of jobs that a strong back can do to make a good wage. Immigration plays a role in it. The media, all of these things are happening. I'm not here to explain why all of it is happening. All I'm here to tell you is that opportunities for people to feel like they are part of healthy, normal communities are eroding for lots of people. But if you're starving for something and someone says, well, we're out of surf and turf, you don't say, well, then I just won't eat. You say, what else do you got? And that is what the Democrats are selling. Democrats are selling, you hear Barack Obama say it, you hear all these guys say it, government is just another word for those things that we all do together, right? It's really not. If that were the case, then watching the Super Bowl would be government because, all of us do it. Government is a specific institution that does specific things. And this brings me to my core insight after writing Liberal Fascism, after spending all this time, as geeky as I am, in politics and philosophy, is what I call the fundamental category error in politics. It is a mistake that libertarians never make. It is a mistake that conservatives only rarely make. And it's a mistake that progressives consider the very heart of good governance and the core of their philosophy. And it's simply this: the government cannot love you. The government can't be your mommy or your daddy or your church or your synagogue or your tribe. It cannot fill the hole in your soul. It cannot give you meaning. It can only be government. The problem is that if you don't have opportunities to have the hole in your soul, if you crave that feeling of belonging to an intact family or a healthy community, and you've never had it or you once had it and you don't have it anymore, you're going to look for it wherever you can. That quest for community will not be denied. And what progressives from Barack Obama to Woodrow Wilson have been selling is this idea that the government in Washington can provide it, and it can't. And that is one of the great things about the last 5 years with Barack Obama in office, is he's been proving it. And it is something that no one's going to take our word for it. They actually have to experience it. But there's still too many people who believe that the answers lie in government. And that's why I want to close by just telling you guys why you should be happy warriors. And there are a few different reasons. First of all, nothing pisses off the left more than a happy conservative. Second of all, if we are in the persuasion business, people are much more likely to listen to you if you're smiling at them rather than if you're wagging your finger at them. This is hugely important. I mean, we get so mad at the opposition that we just start pointing the bony finger of condemnation at them rather than trying to win them over. And that is a huge problem. But you should also be happy for a much more profound reason. And I forgive a minor discursion here, okay? So there's not a person in this room who isn't descended from poor people. Maybe some of you go 3 generations back wealthy. Maybe a few of you, a handful, go 5 generations back wealthy. Maybe there's one person here who's like a Habsburg and goes back 10 generations wealthy. But the simple fact, every single person in this room is descended from poor people. And I bet you're all going through your head, how far back was the first person who graduated from college or from high school in my family? And I bet you don't have to go back very far. And the amazing thing is, for the last 100,000 years, there's a wonderful book by an economist named Deirdre McCloskey. She runs you through all the numbers. For the last 100,000 years, right? The agricultural revolution was 10,000 years ago. The average human being lived on the equivalent of $3 a day. She does the math. I'm not going to bother with the math. I think math is witchcraft. But this held constant in Ming China, in ancient Rome, ancient Greece, anywhere you can think of. Aztec, South America, basically $3 a day. Occasionally you get up to $5, then the crowd would overpopulate and it would crash back down and regress to the mean. So for 100,000 years, 200,000 years, since we were Neanderthals, the wealth of humanity looked like this. And then one time, only one time in human history, it starts to go like this, and then like this. And it's been going like this ever since. And it is because of a single thing, what I call the Lockean revolution in politics. This idea that starts in the 1700s, you can pick your date, 1600s, this idea that that the fruits of your labors belong to you and that there's dignity in it, that getting wealthy is a good thing, that private property is of value. This whole category error thing, I divide almost all political issues down to Locke versus Rousseau. They're great opposites, right? John Locke believed that our rights come from God, not from government. The individual was sovereign. We are captains of ourselves. We form government to do a few limited things because we were all born in a state of sin, built from the crooked timber of humanity. Rousseau has the exact opposite point of view. Rousseau says, no, the group is more important than the individual. We are all born noble savages and we're made corrupt by civilization. The general will is more important than the individual. Explains left and right pretty well. But the Locke-Rousseau thing also runs straight through the human heart. We're all a little bit of both. But the thing is that we lived like the Rousseauian thing for hundreds of thousands of years and got nowhere. The Lockean thing kicks in 3 centuries ago, and we start getting rich fast. It happened in China. You know, people look at China. China switched to markets, bad, corrupt, non-transparent, filthy markets, but markets in 1978. And under what they called authoritarian capitalism. They did this as a last resort. First, they killed 35 million people of their own people, and they're like, damn, that didn't work. Let's try markets. And boom, hundreds of millions of people are lifted out of poverty. Hundreds of millions of people can eat meat for the first time, can read for the first time, live indoors for the first time, have heat and plumbing for the first time. And people like Thomas Friedman and others at the New York Times look at it and go, wow, it must have been the authoritarianism. People ask, why is there poverty? It is the dumbest question. I mean, you have to be too stupid to be a spell checker at an M&M factory. It's the kind of question you expect from Joe Biden. And we know why there's poverty. Poverty is the factory preset of the human condition. As a species and as individuals, we are born penniless, ignorant, and naked. The only question is, why is there wealth? And we have the answer. And it's the only answer. It is this Lockean revolution, which the people in this room are the champions of. Whether you call yourself a libertarian or a Tea Partier or a Republican or a conservative, we are on that side of that fight. It is the good fight. We are on the side of the only successful anti-poverty program in human history. We are on the side. We're on the side of liberty. We are on the side of happiness. Not just for ourselves, but for others. Because as Arthur Brooks probably talked about today, my boss at the American Enterprise Institute, happiness only comes from earned success, from the accomplishments that you can take pride in, that you feel like you had a role in. Government cannot give you happiness. You've got to take happiness from life. And it is our vision, however described, however necessarily regulated and all the rest, that provides that opportunity for happiness. And so you should take it to heart and be happy warriors yourselves. Because it's a good fight, it's a noble fight. And T.S. Eliot was right when he said, no cause is a truly lost cause, because no cause is a truly won cause. This fight goes on forever, and you should be proud and happy that you're in it. Thank you all very much. We're doing Q&A? Yeah, no, I'm fine with Q&A. I just, yeah, okay. I just knew we were running long, and I don't know if people got to get back or. Well, I can't see anybody, so, I mean, it's literally just like a sparkly wall that laughs every now and then. Okay, I'll repeat the question.
If part of what's going on in the United States today is a loss of self-government, what is the one most important thing that could put us back on that track?
Okay, so the question is, if the biggest problem we have is a loss of self-government, what is the one most important thing that could put us back on track? The honest answer is, I'm not sure, right? But the one that I will offer is, I don't know if it's ideal, but it's my favorite answer, which is federalism. I am a huge advocate. In my ideal America, your governor here would have vastly more power, and Barack Obama would have vastly less. And I think we have the pyramid of taxation exactly wrong. The federal government, at the federal level, I am really libertarian. We got to have, although I want a big honking cool army and military, right? I want some courts. Currency's good, one that actually stands for something, be even better. And that's sort of about it, right? I mean, protect the borders. I mean, I could probably come up with a list of 20 things I want the federal government to do. Maybe we can get into the FAA and all that, but really pretty limited role for the federal government. At the state level, I'm more conservative, fiscal conservative, that kind of thing. And at the local level, I'm straight up communitarian. If you want to ban Walmart in your town, I think it's a mistake, but go ahead and do it. If you want to ban booze in your little town, go ahead and do it. If you want to censor porn in your little town, go ahead and do it. But you got to do it democratically. You got to have a fight at the democratic level. If we push these things down to the most local level possible, you empower people at the local level to duke it out. I don't believe that income inequality really bothers a lot of people in this country. What bothers them is an inequality of respect and an inequality of control. People feel like the game is rigged against them. And I think that's something that actually fairly unites the Tea Parties and the Occupy Wall Street crowd. This sense that the game is being rigged from the inside. As a libertarian on economic stuff, I'm a big believer that complexity is a subsidy. And it's a subsidy for rich, smart people with lawyers. The more complex you make it to run a business, to start a life, to run your life, the more you're hurting people who don't have access to the best Rolodex to get the fixers on the phone. And so the single best thing about federalism is that if you push, it is, and I've heard Justice Scalia say this too, it is the best system ever conceived of for maximizing human happiness because it lets the most people live the way they want to live. And normally when I talk to college students, I can do the math on the board and I show them how this is in fact true. And the added benefit is if you push these things down to the most local democratic level possible, you force the winners to look the losers in the eye. Right? I'm not talking about, we can't have Jim Crow, you can't have slavery, you can't have segregation, you can't have that stuff. We fought a civil war, we amended the Constitution a couple times, that issue is settled, it is moral, it is clear, no one wants to go there anyway. But beyond that, let a thousand flowers bloom. And if you lose a fight at the local level, you got to see the guy who won it at the kids' drop-off at soccer practice and at the supermarket. And that creates a certain respect and humility on both sides. And if you keep losing, you got two options. Keep fighting it out democratically, or move. It's the most mobile society in the history of humanity. Vote for your feet. Go live someplace where they want to live like you do. Right? And that's fine too. But why we have to have this one-size-fits-all approach that says the entire country has to live one way, making this a much more boring country to drive across, is insane to me. So that would be my preferred answer. I don't know if it's the ideal one. All right, I guess we're done. Thank you all so much. I appreciate it.